call this meeting to order. Treasurer, call the roll, please.
Mr. Trimmer?
Here.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Here.
Mr. Wallace? Here. Mrs. Carnegie?
Here.
Mr. Glista?
Here. Approval of minutes for the following minutes. January 8th, 2015 special meeting minutes. January 8th, 2015 organizational meeting minutes. January 29 special meeting minutes and regular meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer, call the roll, please.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace? Yes. Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mr. Glista? Yes. Mr. Trimmer?
Yes. Approval of the financial report. Item number 1, recommend approval of the financial report for the month of January 2015.
So moved.
Second. Treasurer, call the roll, please.
Mr. Wallace? Yes. Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mr. Glista? Yes. Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer?
Yes. Item number 2, recommend approval of accounts payable, payroll, and benefits expenditures for January 2015.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer, call the roll, please. Sorry.
Take your pick.
Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mr. Glista? Yes. Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace? Yes. Mr. Trimmer?
Yes. Item number 3, recommend approval of advances and advance returns for the month of January 2015.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer, call the roll, please.
Mr. Glista? Yes. Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace? Yes. Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer?
Yes. Item 4, recommend approval of appropriations for January 2015.
So moved. Second.
Treasurer, call the roll, please.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace? Yes. Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mr. Glista? Yes. Mr. Trimmer?
Yes. Item 5, recommend approval of an amended certificate of resources for January 2015.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer, call the roll, please.
Mr. Wallace? Yes. Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mr. Glista? Yes. Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer?
Yes. Item 6, recommend approval of a resolution to participate and to authorize the Ohio Schools Council to advertise and receive bids on behalf of the Board of Education as per specifications submitted for the cooperative purchase of waste disposal services for the period July 1, 2015 through June 30, 2018. This is a program the school district has participated for the past 6 years, concluding June 30, 2015.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer, call the roll, please.
Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mr. Glista? Yes. Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace? Yes. Mr. Trimmer?
Yes. Item 7, recommend approval of a resolution to participate in the 2015-2016 Cooperative School Bus Purchasing Program and to provide authorization to the Ohio Schools Council to advertise and receive bids on behalf of the Board of Education for the cooperative purchase of bus chassis and bodies. The Board also agrees to pay $325 to the Ohio Schools Council for school district membership as a service fee for this purpose.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer, call the roll, please.
Mr. Glista? Yes. Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace? Yes. Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer?
Yes. Item 8, recommend approval to dispose of a 1999 Thomas Freightliner 72-passenger bus, VIN number as listed, and a 2002 Dodge van, VIN number as listed, at a sales price of $2,300 less bus movers and more charges.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer, call the roll, please.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace? Yes. Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mr. Glista? Yes. Mr. Trimmer?
Yes. Item 9, recommend approval of a proposal from Julian and Grube, Inc. to assist the West Branch Local School District in preparing its basic financial statements, BFS, in compliance with generally accepted accounting principles, we call GAAP, for fiscal years ended June 30, 2015, June 30, 2016, and June 30, 2017 at a cost of $5,700 per year. This is a continuation of two prior 3-year agreements that concluded June 30, 2011 and June 30, 2014, and were at a cost per year of $5,500 per year.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer, call the roll, please.
Mr. Wallace? Yes. Mr. Glista? Yes. Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer?
Yes. Item 10, recommend approval of an extension to an existing copier equipment and printer equipment service agreement with Graphics Enterprises Office Solutions Incorporated. Service agreement to be extended to June 30, 2015 from the current expiration date of March 31, 2015 at no increase to the current monthly rates.
So moved. Second.
Treasurer, call the roll, please.
Mr. Glista.
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yes.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes. We have two items under accounts payable, the Mahoning County ESC for AmeriCorp at $8,000 and Mahoning County ESC for preschool $59,989.35.
So moved. Second.
Treasurer call roll, please.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yes.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Mr. Glista.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes. And recognitions, Dr. Weingart.
Yes, we have 5 of them. Advisor Lori Christen and student council members for homecoming. Congratulations to Queen Leah Bach and court members Alyssa Hatton, Pavan Heath, Brianne Metz, Lexington Pittman, Gabrielle Sainer, and Melinda Trimmer. Congratulations to Mr. Zamorelli and the cast and crew of the recent production of Peter Pan. Congratulations to Mr. Tim Fairfield and the National Honor Society at the high school for their American Red Cross blood drive. Congratulations to our Teenagers of the Month, Alliance Elks BPO number 467, Hannah Jarvis and Marcus Reed in January, Ashley Emig and Alex Buga in February, and also our Alliance Chamber of Commerce recipients Paige Walsh in January and Austin R. Smith in February. Also like to salute our Alliance Review Athletes of the Week, Kaylee Manning and Mason Hughes. Thank you.
Anything else? WBEA comments? WBCEA comments? Visitors' comments? Correspondence? Report to the board, middle school TBT.
Right, and we'll find out what that means. I'm going to introduce the principal, Mr. Roger Kitzmiller, who's going to introduce all these folks who've come here, and I'm going to suggest that maybe at least the folks on this side of the table move so that we can see the presentation.
You guys want to come over here or stand up and
Turn
stretch?
your way if I say that.
You're short.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. It's good to be here again this evening, and we just wanted to I wanted to give kind of an overview before I introduce our presenters for tonight. You know, we've been in OIP for a couple of years, and there's so many acronyms. OIP is Ohio Improvement Process. Of course, out of that comes the district leadership team, known as the DLT. Out of that comes the building leadership teams, which are BLTs. And then really where a lot of the work is done in that whole Ohio improvement process is in TBTs, which are teacher-based teams. And so we have one of our teacher-based teams with us tonight, and I appreciate Mrs. Denise Janaki and Mrs. Krista Schindel for being here. And they're just going to kind of go over what the 5-step process within a TBT looks like, and kind of explain one of their recent ones that they've done, and I think they also have some fun for the board members here too. So we'll see what happens with that. So, Mrs. Janaki and Mrs. Schindel.
Oh. Don't make me do it.
Okay, so Mr. Kitzmiller kind of introduced TBT meetings, but in our TBT meetings, we meet with our grade level by subject areas. So Denise and I both teach 6th grade science. So the whole point of this TBT process is to collect data and then to use this data, chart it, look at it, to then guide our instruction. So the first step is to collect and chart the data. The very first thing we do is come together and create our pre-assessment and our post-assessment that's aligned with our learning targets. And we do this together because we're using common assessments. Then once we give the students their pre-assessment, we then chart the data, and we have 3 groups: proficient, near proficient, and below proficient. And then we separate the students that are on an IEP from the general education group of students.
And what we did is we used our Matter unit. So we have learning targets that are posted on our board, our whiteboard, and we look at our learning target and we design a pre-test from our learning target. So our 4 learning targets was explain that all matter is made from atoms explain that an element is made up of one kind of atom, explain the difference between a molecule and a compound, and explain how molecules behave in a solid, liquid, or gas. So we designed the pretest, we gave the students the pretest, and as you can see, 133 students were below proficient for these particular learning targets. 18 of the students were near proficient in the general ed population, and 10 were proficient. In our special education population, we had 0 students who were proficient, 1 was near proficient, and 20 were below proficient. But keep in mind, this is an introductory concept for these students, and it's probably the first time that a lot of these students, especially molecule behavior, that they've been exposed to. So we look at our data, and then we decide what we're going to do with this data. As you can see, we had 133 students that were below proficient, which leads us to our second step.
All right, step 2 is analyze questions and student responses. So I feel that this step kind of takes the longest. We actually go back into our pre-assessments and we look at the student responses. And we take note on some of the strengths that we see, the weaknesses, common errors, and urgent needs. I would say that this kind of directs the timing of our unit because we don't have unlimited time to get through a unit. So we may spend less time on our strengths and then more time on our weaknesses. But you still have those students who maybe that necessarily wasn't a strength for them. Well, we can't skip it because then they'll never get that concept. So this is maybe we'll do one-on-one instruction or small group instruction so we can kind of move the whole class ahead, but then eventually those kids will catch up because they'll still be getting that content.
And as you can see, that our strengths, we divided into strengths, weaknesses, common errors, and urgent needs. There's various templates that we could use. This is the template that we chose to use. Our strengths, there's a type that should be some knowledge of matter. Some of the students had the knowledge of being able to draw how molecules reacted in a solid, liquid, or gas, but they didn't understand the concept that there are spaces or they're close together. So they had kind of an idea, but they weren't completely accurate. That was, again, our weaknesses. Our IEP students, unfortunately, had a really difficult time with this concept. And most of the common errors, which I thought was really interesting when we gave the test, that most of the students believed that air was not matter. And obviously that is a misconception. So right then, that was a red flag to us saying in our instruction strategies when we get to step 3 that we had to get that point across that air is matter, and we had to figure out how we're going to teach that concept. Drawing molecule movement in a solid, liquid, or gas. Again, I told you they could draw the molecules, but the molecular formula, like water, H2O, they didn't have the drawings accurate, and the spacing was not accurate. Introduction to the concepts of matter. Again, some of those IEP students had a difficult time. So, which brings me to the third step, which is my favorite. This is my favorite part.
Okay, step 3 is determine the instructional strategies that will be used. For step 3, we group our students into these 3 groups that you see. The above, which is kind of our enrichment category, the at grade level, and then the below grade level. Then we sit down and we discuss what can we do to move these students up so they're all proficient. We differentiate our instruction to meet all the needs, or the needs of all 3 groups. And we come up with like science experiments, different activities that would be good for each category.
And like I said, this is the part that's my favorite. What we decide to do is we look at the first 3 learning targets, and we decided that we wanted to do type of a research. The Ohio Department of Education has now, in the model curriculum of science, has implemented language arts. And research, reading, writing in the sciences is a very important part. So unlike in a language arts class that they might do an expository or a narrative type of research, we decided to do kind of a fun research by having the students design like a front page of a newspaper with a rubric that the students followed, that they would, be expected to put the points in that we wanted them to put in. At our above proficient level, our students did more rigor into the research. They did a Google Drive. Some did a hard copy, and this was one that I just pulled out. They did a hard copy. This was actually done by one of the IEP students, which I thought was pretty neat. They could choose. They had choices. So a Google Drive, some of them felt more comfortable doing it on Google Drive and Google Docs, or some of them still like the hard copy. So they had the choice. At grade level, students did a pretty good job. They had a template. At above grade level, they could design their own. At grade level, again, they had a template if they chose to, or they could have designed their own. And then below, with the help of our intervention specialist, they had a guided template, and which was kind of neat to see that our above proficient students, when they were finished, they actually collaborated with our below students to help them. And then for our third learning target was the how molecules behave in a solid, liquid, or gas. You guys have to do this. So there you go. We gave hand boilers across to all students in the classroom. All students were given hand boilers. And we gave them some instruction. It's like blown glass, so we told them to be very careful. And we instructed that, what state is that liquid in? Well, that liquid is it's in a liquid state. So they got to play around with them, like Mr. Telstra is doing right now. And
he was cheating.
Oh, he's cheating.
For a while there, I didn't know that he was...
Are you cool? Anyway, and the kids explained, well, we asked them, questioning, what's happening? Well, it goes from a liquid and it's bubbling. Well, why is that bubbling? And where is that bubbling coming from? So we generated questions. We were really pleased with our below proficient students. They were able to explain with that concrete evidence right in front of them, they were able to explain that pretty thoroughly. With our at grade level and our above students, that came very easily to them. So we decided that we wanted to try simulation design. So we did a snapshot. I showed a snapshot. We did it. It's called PHET. It's recommended by the Ohio Department of Education. And this was a website that they recommend. And this is just a snapshot. So what the students could do is they could heat the tank and see that the molecules, if the tank was heated, that the molecules are moving and they're spreading really far apart. And as you bring the temperature down, and it cools to even as far as ice, again, that's a snapshot, the molecules become really tight and close together. So they could design, what they did is they looked at that. Krista, do you want to go back to that? What they did was then they measured the temperature and constructed a graphical representation to aid in that devising of that explanation of the molecule behavior, which I thought was pretty fascinating. I was really impressed that our above students, they were graphing and they were doing a really good job with that. Even our grade level students, they needed some guided instruction, but they did excellent. And even our below students, they wanted to be a part of that simulation as well. So we had a lot of the students get on the computer as well. And then our above students, I had brought in some dry ice, which is always fun. And the kids were really excited about the dry ice. So our above proficient students designed experiments. We had them in groups. And they designed experiments, and then at grade level and below proficient students got to be a part of that. And it was really neat to see because they showed ownership. It was their experimentation, their explanation, and we were facilitators instead of being an authoritarian type of teacher in front, going step by step. They designed it. And in our in our new model curriculum, we want to go towards that design process. So I thought that was a really cool thing that I saw in my teaching, that these kids know a lot more than what we think they do. They know a lot more.
Okay, step 4 is when we implement the instruction consistently. And I wish that we could have a video clip of us actually teaching and the students working, but we have to record it on paper. So we just kind of write what somebody or what you or Mr. Kitzmiller would see if you came into our classroom. What would the teacher be doing? What would the students be doing? How would they be grouped? And what activities or experiments would they be doing?
And this is part of our OTES evaluation. So if you or Mr. Kitzmiller or Dr. Weingart would be walking in our classroom, again, they would see both of us being more of a facilitator in the classroom, walking around, making sure students are on task, listening to students. Sometimes we don't listen enough. Listening to students, questioning students, that's what you would probably see. Sometimes me on top of the table doing something stupid, but
Never. Okay, step 5 is the final step. This is when we collect, chart, and analyze the pre and post data. So we've given our post-assessment, and then we get together and we record the results. We keep those 3 categories, proficient, near proficient, and below proficient. Then once we chart, it's not over, we put our minds together, and as you can see, we have students who are below proficient. So what can we do to move those students up to be proficient? Because we don't want to move on, and we still have students who are below proficient. So we decide, do we intervene? Are we going to have small group instruction? Then we look at what instructional practices were successful, or maybe some that we would like to change for the next unit and do something different.
because this is a work in progress and we're tweaking and changing all the time, my problem is I still look at that below proficient, and those are 9 students, or near proficient. We have 19 students that I don't feel comfortable moving on. And what do we do to help these students? Small group, intervention. Our intervention is set up for language arts and math. So actually today I had a couple kids stay after school to work on, they didn't do well on their assessment. So I have to make sure that they understand it. That is a little bit of a problem, is trying to get the kids. What do we do now with these kids who don't understand it? That's the part that wears and tears on my heart. Like, what are we going to do for these kids? So we just find ways. After school, we pull them out. Sometimes if they don't want to take that 15-minute recess, they want to come in and we work with them. Parents are pretty acceptable when we ask them if they could stay after school. And like I said, I just had a student after school that we worked on. So it is a work in progress. And the positive about this TBT approach is that we collaborate. We sit together, we plan lessons, we look at each other and we say, well, what did we do wrong? Or what could we do better? Or what worked? If it worked, we got to keep this. Let's look at our data. So it forces us to look at our data. It forces us to keep those students who are not proficient, keep those red flags in the back of our minds and saying, what can we do to improve? What can we do to improve our instruction? And that's basically our 5-step process. This is new. It's a work in progress. This is a template that was, I think there were 2 or 3 templates that were out there. This is the one that we chose.
What kind of time frame do you have from beginning?
That's a good question. That's something that we need to work on. We'll give the we'll design the pre-assessment. Usually, the night we'll grade the pre-assessments between 15 to 20 questions. We'll grade that. We should have our data charted by either, if we do this on a Monday, we should have our data charted by that Wednesday. So then we meet. We try to get it done. One of the county consultants said you could get at least the first 3 steps done within a week. We had a little difficult time because of just the everyday life of school. But we try to...
Snow days.
Snow days and all that. So we try. We try. Sometimes it's boom, 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 and sometimes it isn't, to be honest with you. But
Are these also going on simultaneously with different topics, or is this, one topic, the next topic?
no, like we're going to get ready to give our pre-test on density.
So
Yep.
they're all going on at the
Yep.
same time? So
Yep.
when you're meeting, you might be talking about multiple topics,
No.
not
Yes.
just this
No.
particular
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They haven't been.
Yeah.
Their post-assessment is put in the grade book, but their pre-test is, we grade it both. We do not put it in the grade book because they haven't been introduced to the material yet.
Right.
They always ask that question every time. Is this graded?
Very good.
Do they see their pre-test, pre-assessment, or is it just something you look at for your data?
Just us. We just look at it.
Now,
Yep.
the post-test, we came up with folders for mastery. We don't like to put letter grades, A, B, C, D. Each student has a folder of all the learning targets for all year in life science, physical science, and earth and space science. So those targets are in front of them. So we'll have the kids pull out their folders and we'll say, look, we're going to work on targets 1, 2, and 3 in earth and space science. Once we give the post-test, we give them the post-test and we tell them a mastery level with a certain percentage, you get mastery. So they themselves put in an M for mastery. Oh, look, I mastered the learning target on molecule behavior. Look, I don't have to take a second assessment. Or I'll give a different, if some students are near proficient or not mastering, then they'll ask, do you have a different form of an assessment? Usually we have 2 forms of the assessment, and they get that second chance to see where maybe they can improve.
Interesting. All right. Thank
Can
you.
I ask you just a couple questions?
Sure.
Okay. Mrs. Shinaki,
Sure.
don't blush. You've been an outstanding science teacher for a number of years, so how does this make you a better science teacher?
How does that make me? Well, actually, I kind of fought it a little bit
No.
because of the data. I'm like, then here's another thing, another. Okay, after 30 years, this is my 30 years of teaching. And it really, when I sit down with my colleague and we sit and we look at this data and we think, gosh, my heart goes right to those kids. What am I doing wrong that those 19 kids aren't passing or aren't proficient? So it makes me aware of my instruction, and I have to do more research and how I can get, or how these kids can learn in a different way, because all kids learn differently. And I have to find a way to get those kids to bump them up to proficient. So me, making me better, doing more research, looking at more developmentally appropriate activities for students, it just makes me more aware of what I need to do.
That's that word right down there in the bottom, right? Differentiation.
Differentiation. Just like if you would come into our classroom, I forgot to say that, John, thank you. If you came into my classroom or Mrs. Schindell's classroom, you would see one common concept being taught, but taught 3 different ways. So that would be the differentiating of that particular learning target. What's your other question?
Oh, I have 3 or 4. But, but talk to us. Mr. Kismiller, you may
Yeah.
want to chime in on this too. How important is it for you guys, for both of you, to have common planning time to implement something like this? Because I am sitting there thinking, I taught under the old schedule where I didn't have common planning time with my colleagues. I don't know when I would be
Right.
with you.
It's very, very important. We can bounce ideas off each other. 2 heads are better than 1. It's really important. This is the part, designing the lessons, I'm really passionate about. This is the part that I love to do. And to be able to bounce ideas off of the young one now, the young, it's exciting for me. And to be able to have the opportunity to be able to do that is wonderful, because I know in some districts they don't have that. So we're very, very fortunate to be able to plan and have common planning together. That is so essential, especially with the new model curriculum and the Common Core.
Would you just explain to all of us on the board what the setup is? Who teaches what in the sixth grade hallway?
Mrs. Schindel and myself, we teach science.
So you are when we're talking about this, that's two of you talking together.
Two of us are talking together, yes. Mrs. Schindel, Mrs. Chris, Ms. Lucenti teaches math. So the days that she and I are not meeting, she meets with the math teacher, but I always get her.
And we do the same thing for math, too.
Yeah.
So I have two going on.
Do you get a bonus for doing both? Or?
I don't know, do I? No.
And then Mr. Hancock and Mrs. Hobbs teach social studies. Correct me if I'm wrong.
You're right.
And then Mrs. Hobbs, Mrs. Ring, Mrs. Chris teaches language arts.
Right. So Mrs. Schindel, you're going to have to do this with a math teacher as well.
Yep, double time.
Okay, and I think I know the answer to this, but I ask it anyway. This is all new this year, so do you expect this to be a little more user-friendly next year, the process?
Yeah, I mean, the more we look at it, I'm still not 100% comfortable with the template yet, and we can design our own template. I'm told that we can, with the county consultants come in and said, well, this is just a template. So the more we've
tweaked it a little
Yeah,
bit,
we
too.
have tweaked
We've
it.
changed it.
I think this might even be an elementary version, I'm
Yeah,
not
it
sure,
is.
of the template. But, as we continue this process, it's a work in process, I can foresee us looking at maybe a different setup, maybe. We have to continue to work with it.
I think you just have to get used to it. I mean, the first time we sat down, it all looked like it was written in
A foreign
Spanish.
language, yeah.
We're like, what, you expect us to do this?
Yeah.
It was really confusing, but we
But I think
worked hard.
the most important part of this whole process is not writing it down. It's being able to sit with your colleagues, collaborate, looking at the data, being able to collaborate, and what we can do, and how this data can drive our instruction to improve or below to near proficiency.
When you say common assessment, does that mean that a kid in your class and a kid in your class are taking the major tests? Those are the same tests.
Correct.
So if you find 3 or 4 questions that the general population is not doing well on,
I look at it and I probably blame myself. I'll look at the validity of the question and I'll look at it and I'll say, gee, if 25 students across the board in 4 classes aren't getting that question, what am I doing? What's wrong in that question? So I kind of look at myself, first of all, and then go from there.
thank you, I'm having the best time I've had in a long time.
So
I have
I
one
like
more
to-
question, and that is this. So what happens next year, watch Denise here, when you're reassigned to a different grade level?
Help! Help! Help!
Okay, all of a sudden, something goes up, you get your dream job in Columbus, something like that. So we have 2 new people plunked down there. What happens to them?
Just the 2 new people.
Yeah, next year we have 2 new people teaching science in the 6th grade. What would happen to them? And I really don't know the answer.
Well,
to
then
that.
what happened to us?
Well, I'm talking about.
Where'd we go?
No, where am I going? No. Well, I can answer, yeah. I can answer that, I think. We designed a curriculum based on the model curriculum. So the last 3 summers, we met, and we have a curriculum map that we came up with. So if a new teacher would come in to 6th grade, we have that curriculum map, the learning targets, everything kind of dissected from the model curriculum. We had to dissect the content elaborations. So we have that. We have all our learning targets done, from earth science to life science to physical science. So a new teacher could come in and look at all the learning targets and go from there. So they would have at least
And I really
something.
appreciate that, and we've all been in that situation as new teachers when you come in and you feel like you have to invent everything. What you're saying is there's a pretty good roadmap, whether you're there, And I would think that each year it would get deeper and better in
Yeah.
those assessments.
Because those learning targets should be tweaked every year. So we gather together again, like she and I would look together and we'll look at them and we'll say, this, no, this didn't mean that. We need to figure that out. So it's tweaked every year, and it should be. We should look over it. At the end of the year, we should look back and we should look at all those learning targets. Because the state now doesn't give you step by step, at least in science. I don't know the others. At least in science. At least in science, they don't tell you step one, this is what you do, this is what you do, this is what you do. They give this very narrative, abstract,
Generic.
and then we have to look into it and then pull out our vocabulary, pull out the concepts, pull out the interpretation. The interpretation is interesting because we'll be with a group of teachers teaching the same thing, and they interpreted the content elaboration differently than maybe you or I would interpret that. So, in science, not speaking for math or language arts, but in science, the model curriculum is the content elaboration, and what we had to do, and it was a work in progress, 2 or 3 years, we had to sit down and we had to figure out, what does that mean? With a group of we worked together as a county with different teachers across our county.
And I can't take credit for that. That was done when I got here.
But as someone who was relatively
Yeah.
new, I'm sure that was extremely helpful.
Oh, yes, definitely. That helped a lot.
It's pretty
I have
exciting.
a question.
Pretty
I got to do
exciting.
one more. I got to do one more thing.
Okay, you do that one more thing.
Yeah, you ask the question, I'll get it right.
You want me to ask the question
Yeah.
now?
That's over.
The exciting thing, even though this is a small snapshot in time,
Right.
is your pre-assessment to your
Yeah.
post-assessment, you see that the student growth.
Right.
Even though I know you're a perfectionist and you don't like those
I know.
below
Right.
proficients
Right.
and near proficients, but it's obvious that they're
Right.
learning, they're growing in their
Right.
learning. So.
And two, a lot of our concepts are first time that they have, read it or looked at it, or something like that. So, we kind of go in knowing that maybe that pretest is going to be kind of low on some, and then some surprises you, really. So that's what's good about this. You might think, they're going to just do horrible, and then it surprises you. But one other thing I wanted to show you real quick, because if I were doing a science experiment here, I'd love it. But I have to show you the one. I showed you how I showed you how molecule behavior acted in a liquid to a gas. And now the kids, what they did is we had 2 liquids. And we wanted to see if 2 liquids could make a solid.
Sure. Careful. It might spill.
Oh, yeah, I have to go. We're good.
And I don't have my glasses.
I have them right here.
We're going to put 2. This is ethyl alcohol, and we always tell my students never assume that a clear liquid is water. Okay? So we put it in. That's sodium silicate, and I colored it warrior green. Just stir it up. Stirring fast is the catalyst. And each student in both classes have to make this. Your daughter and your...
Told ya.
Brad's going to get mad. Okay.
not,
But
though.
it's not a do. You'll see what happens. So the kids are like, oh, this is called 2 liquids? This is amazing. Well, what are the 2 liquids? Well, it's turning into a solid right now. So then I tell them to roll it like a meatball. And they roll it like a meatball. And they roll and they get impatient, but they keep rolling. And then after so long, you'll have students that it will look like a glass marble because they're precise. That stands with
Pretty concise, huh? He couldn't wait to show us the things at home in the Gatorade.
The density.
Wow.
And he said, well, we got these special marbles, and she didn't have them today. Special beads.
Yeah.
And I was too impatient, that's why I just used those.
So and then you can see it's still wet, but you can see that those 2 liquids that couldn't take the property of bouncing can bounce. So there you go again. there's the concrete to the abstract. They could see that, oh, those are two liquids. How do molecules behave in two liquids? They're semi-spaced apart. They use their hands. And then how do they react in a solid? They're packed close together, which segues right into our density unit. So the balls then bounce. So there you go.
Thank you.
That's my
You can help us.
Take sixth grade
I want to
science.
be the female version of
Oh,
that.
no. Bill Nye, the science guy.
This being science, when you look at this in, say, math, the difference in math is something that you said was you were able to sit down with other math or science teachers from the county and kind of go through and dissect your standards and come up with what needs to be taught to fulfill those science standards. That's where math and language arts and everybody else is struggling, because we've done it ourselves at West Branch. I remember Rachel and I 2 years ago, we've done this 3 times. We had done it 3 times. We sat down with the Common Core standards, dissected them, broke them down, and had the same problems that they did when we're looking at it, saying, okay, this is what they're saying the kids need to know. And we're writing down our learning targets, and then we look at, say, Cambridge, who had theirs done, and we look at theirs and go, oh my gosh, they think it's something completely different. And we're having that problem from just in Mahoning County, school to school. We may think the standard means this, they think it means this. And the whole thing about the Common Core was supposed to be that it was supposed to be teacher, parent, student friendly. And it hasn't turned out that way for, say, mathematics and language arts and even science, because every educator that's looking at this is seeing something different. And so you may have, no one's purchasing curriculum anymore, so all the teachers are developing their own curriculum. So our curriculum that we develop may be quite different than, say, what they're using in Western Reserve in 8th grade, because just the way you look at it maybe doesn't come out the same. So it's not as cut and dry as some people would like to make people believe. And then you have no knowledge of what the kids are actually going to be tested. What are the questions going to be like? What do they look like? What are you asking them? We don't know. And we get no feedback from that to find out, is our curriculum right or are we wrong? And do we need to adjust it? All we know is if they're going to get it right or wrong. Well, that doesn't help us if we're, if they're wrong, were they wrong because they didn't understand? We were correct in our curriculum, but they didn't understand the question, so they missed it. We have no way of adjusting because of that, because you don't know. That's the hard part about this. But the DBT and driving instruction with data, Rachel Basal, I'll be honest, she brought that in 4 years ago. We've been doing it before we had to. And her and I would give the same exact tests, the same exact quizzes for 4 years. So if my students didn't get it and her students did get it, she was able to look at me and go, or I could look at her and say, what did you do? How did you do this? What did you teach? And we've been bouncing that off. And then again, that goes back to the common planning time. We have the opportunity to do that. So it works across all the levels, not just, for that. But they seem to do a really good job at that.
Thank you. Thanks for that insight.
Thank you.
You can go work some minutes on.
Yeah.
Moving on to the board agenda. Old business, no old business, new business. Item number 1, recommend approval of a change in the school calendar with January 26th, 2015, February 2nd, 2015, February 19th, 2015, and February 20th, 2015 as being calamity days due to inclement weather.
So moved.
Second,
You're a big fan.
February 27th.
Treasurer call the roll.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Glista?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer?
Yes. Item 2, recommend approval for the Damascus school staff's accounts, budget, and/or purpose statement for the 2014-15 school year. Exhibit 1.
So moved.
Second,
Treasurer call the roll.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Glista?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
yes.
Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer?
Yes. Item 3, recommend approval to adopt the school calendar for the 2015-2016 academic year, Exhibit 2.
So moved.
Second.
I'd also like to mention in regards to item 3, the school calendar, that this recommendation by Dr. Weingart is coming from the recommendation of a committee comprised of 15 members representing administrators, Board of Education members, teachers, and staff. Treasurer, call the roll.
Mr. Glista? Yes. Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mr. Walls?
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer?
Yes. Item 4, recommend approval to continue offering the open enrollment option for the 15-16 school year for both adjacent and non-adjacent school districts.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer, call the roll, please.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Glista?
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer?
Yes. Item 5, recommend approval to the Sebring West Branch Fast Pitch League to utilize the high school girls softball fields for the 2015 summer with coordination through the athletic directors.
So moved. Second.
Treasurer, call the roll, please.
Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Glista?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer?
Yes. Item 6, recommend approval of additions and corrections to the policy manual procedure for student athletes, cheerleaders, and marching band members to be excused from high school physical education requirement in accordance with Ohio law. Second reading, Exhibit 3.
So moved.
Second. Treasurer, call the roll, please.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Glista? Yes. Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer?
Yes. Item 7, recommend acceptance of the following gifts and donations. Mr. and Mrs. Bill Walbrown, Above and Beyond Award, $500 per school for a total of $2,000. Mr. and Mrs. Greg Carver for football and boys basketball game donations, $110. Ms. Julie Runkofelt, boys basketball game ball for $50. Mr. and Mrs. Eric Glista for boys basketball game ball at $50. And Ms. Patricia Jarvis for academic challenge, $7.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer, call the roll.
Mr. Glista? Yes. Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer?
Yes. Item 8, item 8A, recommend approval to grant a 3-year contract to Daniel Telsrow as treasurer for August 1, 2015 through July 31, 2018, period, at his current salary.
So moved. Second.
Treasurer, call the roll.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Glista? Yes. Mr. Trimmer?
Yes. Item B, recommend approval to employ the following staff as mentors for the 2014-15 school year. Tracy Hinkle, Chris Leidick, Natalie Martig, Heidi Shreve, Amber Wilson, Penny DeShields, Tanya Edie, Annie Celaroli, Tina Mall, and Sarah Jones.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer, call the roll, please.
Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Glista?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer?
Yes. Item C, recommend approval of the following addition to the certificated licensed substitute list for the 2014-15 school year. Jason Baker.
So moved.
Second. Treasurer, call the roll, please.
Mr. Wallace? Yes. Mr. Glista? Yes. Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer?
Yes. Item D, recommend approval to accept the retirement of Barbara Sulka at the conclusion of the 2014-15 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Dr. Weingart.
Thank you. I always like to take an opportunity when someone is going to retire to say a few things about them. Mrs. Salka, as I'm sure you all know, and maybe you were one of her students, but she has taught French here at West Branch High School for 20 years, and she's going to be retiring, not retire, but retiring at the end of this year. We certainly wish her well in retirement.
Treasurer, call the roll, please.
Mr. Glista? Yes. Ms. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer?
Yes. Item E, recommend approval to accept the retirement of Dr. Scott Weingart as superintendent at the conclusion of his current contract effective July 31, 2015.
So moved.
Second.
And at this time, I would like to take this
I got
opportunity
nothing to say. My
to
mother's on.
Speed dial, we got her.
say a few words. I can honestly say I've had the privilege of working with Dr. Weingart for many years, several years prior to me being on the school board. It's been a pleasure to work with Dr. Weingart. Appreciate all his work. He's definitely bleeds green and has been a real asset to our school and our community. Additionally, I'd like to say Dr. Weingart will retire on July 31st, 2015, after 20 years of service to West Branch Local Schools. He is a 1971 graduate of West Branch High School, where he has served as Warrior Chief. He received his bachelor's degree in 1975 from the College of Worcester. He holds a master's degree in education from Ashland University and doctorate in education administration from Arizona State University. Dr. Weingart has spent his entire working career in the fields of higher education and public education as a teacher and administrator. In 1995, Dr. Weingart was hired as the principal of West Branch Junior High and Damascus Elementary School. In 2000, he was named principal of the original Beloit Elementary and served as assistant to the superintendent and curriculum director until 2004, when he was named superintendent of West Branch Schools. Dr. Weingart has served West Branch as superintendent for 11 years and will retire at the end of July 2015. Dr. Weingart is a longtime member of two statewide organizations, the Buckeye Association of School Administrators and the Ohio Association of School Administrators, where he served on the board of directors and as president. He currently serves as a member of the board of directors of the Mahoning County School Employees Insurance Consortium. He is a member of the board of directors of the Sebring West Branch Foundation, where he currently serves as secretary. He's also a member of the West Branch Alumni Association, the West Branch Hall of Fame Committee, and a member of the Damascus Rurotans. Dr. Weingart and his wife Shelley have two children, Valerie and Carson, who are both West Branch High School graduates and both attending Ball State. Dr. Weingart regards the opportunity to serve his alma mater for the past 20 years as one of the greatest honors of his career. He is proud of his numerous accomplishments and awards that the district has received during his time here, and credits the success of the school district to great students, a caring and creative staff, and a supportive and involved community. Again, I'd like to thank Dr. Weingart.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Treasurer, call the roll, please. Oh, somebody else want to
I'd like to say something, too. I've been on the school board a long time.
Yes.
I've known all 6 of our superintendents. I've got to work with 3 of them, Mr. Dorimo, Mr. Bermuno, and Dr. Weingart. And Dr. Weingart has always had the best interest of the kids in West Branch and the community in his heart. And the only bad thing about him is that he's a College of Worcester graduate, because Mount Union and us were big rivalries. So that's the only bad thing I can say about it.
Treasurer, call the roll, please.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yes.
Mr. Walls.
Yes.
Mr. Glista.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes. Item F, recommend approval of the following supplementals for the 2014-15 school year pending certification as listed.
So moved.
Second.
God bless you.
Treasurer, call the roll, please.
We have a game to get
That was Mrs. you.
I did, yes.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yes.
Mr. Walls.
Yes.
Mr. Glista.
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes. Item G, recommend approval of the following professional leave superintendent's assignments requests as listed.
So moved.
Second. Treasurer, call the roll, please.
Mr. Walls.
Yes.
Mr. Glista.
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes. And we do have some items on the agenda addendum under new business. Item number 1 is to recommend approval to accept the retirement of Rebecca Hobbs, a middle school teacher, at the conclusion of the 2014-15 school year in accordance with a rehire provision in the negotiated master agreement.
So moved. Second.
Treasurer, call the roll.
Just after they do.
We can hold on a second, do
Sure.
this part first.
Yeah, I don't often get to say this. Mrs. Hobbs and I were in high school together. She is completing 35 years here with West Branch Local Schools. She's currently at the middle school, though when I started in 1995, over at the junior high end Damascus Elementary, she was a 6th grade elementary school teacher there, and Mrs. McLaughlin is reminding me she was at Knox as well. So we wish her well, though we'll get to keep her around for a couple more years.
Treasurer, call the roll, please.
Mr. Walls.
Yes.
Mr. Glista?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer?
Yes. Item 2, recommend approval to accept the retirement of Sue DeTilio, an elementary teacher, at the conclusion of the 2014-15 school year in accordance with the rehire provisions in the negotiated master agreement.
Mrs. DeTilio is currently at Damascus Elementary and has always been at Damascus Elementary. She was at the old Damascus Elementary, lived through the renovation, and is now teaching at the new Damascus Elementary. She's been with us for 23 years. She's currently at the 4th grade, and we're going to get to keep her around for a couple more years too, which we appreciate.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer call the roll, please.
Mr. Glista?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer?
Yes. Item 3, recommend approval to accept the retirement of Elizabeth Wise, an educational aide, effective June 30, 2015.
So moved.
Oh, Ms. Wise has been with us for 29 years, and we wish her well in retirement.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer call the roll, please.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Glista? Mr.
Yes.
Trimmer?
Yes. Item 4, recommend approval to employ Victoria McGuire as a classified substitute for the 2014-15 school year, pending certification.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer call the roll.
Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Glista?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer?
Yes. Item 5, recommend approval to employ Aaron Berg as a certificated substitute for the 2014-15 school year, pending certification.
So moved.
Who
John.
did- Wallace? Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Glista?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer?
Yes. With no further matters before the board,
Good luck to the girls, and
Motion to
we're all
adjourn.
going to head on down that
I
way.
make a motion to
Right?
adjourn.
Second. Yep, yep.
You declare.
so declared. Thank you.
I like our new,
Time to sign.
Well,
Don't lose them.
Yeah.
I hope you do, because I'm not sure where the other ones are. I
Yeah, we
miss
got it back on.
I miss Mona. I miss Mona.
I asked him. He said, did you lose them? He said, I'm Mona
These are
Lisa.
easier for me to
Mona
run.